before coming here, I was in Montreal just before, literally a few days before coming to Dubai. And I was sitting down with a friend, a very good friend of mine who now lives here. And he told me, get ready to lose a friend. And I was like, why? And he's like, man, friends who do business with each other, it never works out. Even if you guys love each other, it's a recipe for disaster.
Our guests today run the cleanest business in town.
Rami Shaar and Jad Halaoui.
The founders of Washmen have been keeping our clothes, shoes, and accessories sparkling since 2015. The pair struck up a university friendship that turned into an ongoing business partnership, keeping 8,000 households in clean linens a month. What was first an asset-light app to connect customers to cleaners has evolved to take the washing into their own hands. After traveling the world to see the 20 top laundries, from France to South Korea, Washmen spent 18 months building a state-of-the-art facility in Jebel Ali that is revolutionizing the way we do laundry. But the launch of their facility didn't come without its setbacks. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and stiff competition made nothing came easily. But through it all, the Washmen were never afraid to get their hands dirty to get the job done. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Homegrown DXB, the show taking you inside the lives of the people changing yours right here in Dubai. I'm your host, Omar Butti. And I'm delighted to have with me today the Washmen, Rami Shaar, and of course Jad Halaoui, the founders of this business. Thank you so much for being with us on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I want to start off with your origin story, if you will. I'm sure you've told this before, but I think it's a good way to sort of set the pace as we go into our discussion. Take us back to, before 2015 when you guys launched. What were you guys doing at the time? Where did the Washmen idea come from? How did it all come together?
Okay, so after graduating from university, I went into the banking world, worked in investment banking, so very long hours, and didn't have the chance to find a good laundry, get it done on time. I'm always kind of recycling shirts, recycling whatever to get by, and I found it to be a real pain, right? So I came up with the idea. I saw another startup kind of pop up back in 2013 with a laundry. It's called Laundry Box, which I found pretty cool. And then, but I felt it was a little not the right product to market fit that I would, if I was the founder of it. So I kept
Why not? What was lacking?
First, at the time for me, I found it expensive. It was limited by the boxes, if it was in your building or not. It wasn't really too scalable, heavy capex to be able to reach your customer base. And then you need to kind of like have commercial agreements with every building, which is quite tedious, right, to do. So I was kind of a spectator of that business on the outside, seeing how it would play out. I had friends in common that knew the founders. And then I started getting a bit more interested in starting something myself. So I'm like, maybe I could do this in a bit more of a, I would say, asset-light approach. And I pitched the idea to a friend who I just met. And I was telling her, hey, listen, I have this idea of an app that you could do your laundry and we come to your house and we do the pickup. And she was just starting off at Uber back in 2014 or late 2013. When they opened their offices here. She was, I think, the second employee. And she said, hey, listen, we're hiring. There's good equity on the line. How about you leave your banking job, put the idea on the side and come join us at Uber. So literally 3 days later, I had this kind of banking career into, investment banking, private equity. And I was kind of building that up, but I was flirting with the idea of being an entrepreneur. And I kind of took the decision to step into the startup world at Uber. So I joined them in early 2014. And kind of, saw how operations works. When you're a banker, everything is an Excel model and presentations. But when you're on the ground, pitching to drivers, come on the system, giving them the phones, training them, working with, larger players to build on the Uber vision in the region and how fast it was growing. I was quite fascinated by all of that, especially with, how operations and tech comes in together with all the data that you can act on every week to be able to take strategic decisions to push the needle forward. And I thought, you know what, I like this model. I like the the hustle of it. And I went back to my original idea. It was exactly 365 days at Uber. And I approached my general manager.
The 365 days?
No, it was just 2 weeks before, actually. There was maybe an old story I haven't shared in a while, which was I was actually trying to get into the product side of Uber. I had a very strong interest in building product and apps and all of that, and design. And I kind of got close to moving to San Francisco to join the HQ team there. And then I had kind of like a blocker. And it was the general manager who didn't approve that move because of just, not a good relationship between the employee and the manager at the time. And that fueled me up, that I was like, how can someone's judgment of me have such an impact on my future, right? And I want to take all of that and put it into my own hands. And I went back quickly, I was sitting down, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And I went back to my original idea that I pitched to my friend. And I'm like, you know what? There's 2 more weeks until my shares vest at Uber. I'll wait for that. I'll get the shares and then I'll resign. And 9 p.m. comes in on 365 days after, my first day of joining. And I sit down with my general manager. I'm like, we need to talk. He's like, check my calendar. I'm like, we're going to talk right now, right? I couldn't wait a minute. So I resigned then. And soon after, I jumped right into the deep end. I approached Jad, who I know from high school. We lived, together in university.
How long have you guys known each other?
For 21 years.
21 years.
Yeah.
And you still like each other after all that time?
Yeah, of course.
Not easy when you run a business together.
Sure, I can imagine.
So I approached him as an investor originally, and he liked the idea. Then I realized to really do this, you need a strong partner. And at the time, for me, Jad was one of the smartest people I knew, and I needed someone who's going to be a sponge for knowledge. He's going to read books. He's going to read everything about the industry, know it inside out, and I know he's quite good at that. And especially given that he's coming from a world of operations, he was working at Schlumberger, top, only the smartest people get into these kind of jobs, right? In the A team of Schlumberger. So I was like, you know what, this is the right guy for the operations. And I think, looking back at it, I would say my first step was obviously deciding to start the business. But I think the biggest crucial step in the success of what we built today is picking Jad as a partner.
I mean, that's a great way to bring you in.
Yeah, thank you.
So what was that like from your perspective? So you were working in oil and gas.
So I'll tell you the story I tell myself. So the story I tell myself is this. So I was in Canada from 2006 to about 2015. And in 2015, I had spent about 4.5 years in the oil and gas industry. One of those years was in Norway, but 3.5 of them were in Canada. It was cold. I used to work outdoors, extremely hard work, but the money was really good. And the lifestyle was on and off very good. So you had 2 weeks on, 1 week off, but in winters you would work 10 weeks in a row and then you would take a week off and you had a great summer. I was kind of done with that lifestyle and I had reached a junction in 2015 where I was looking for something else.
And why were you done with the lifestyle?
It was very difficult to feel like I belonged to something, whether it was a community, a group of friends. And so the stories or the checkpoints or milestones that are etched in my memory until today are, I used to live in Edmonton and I would drive down to Calgary to just be with my friends most of the time. And that house that I was living in, we were like 5 people. One of them moved to Vancouver. The other one was moving with his wife to London, England, so very far away. And then the last guy was moving into a house he had just bought. And my girlfriend at the time had been laid off and had to go halfway across the country. And so I found myself alone and I did not want to rebuild what had taken me 4.5 years to build in Calgary. So I was looking for something new. And we had this mentality of, in the field, you would always tell yourself you expand and you contract. And what that meant financially. So you can expand to live the life that you would dream of with all the money that you're earning. But then there was time to contract when the opportunity came. So when Rami reached out to me, the opportunity was attractive, and it was one of those ideas or one of those opportunities you get once in a decade.
So immediately from the get, you heard the idea and you thought, this sounds great.
No, it wasn't that straightforward. I had heard the idea, and he reached out to me. I don't know why I remember this date, March 18th, because I think it was when I was going to Italy where I just come back from Italy, something along those lines. But March 18th, we had a conversation. I was studying for my GMAT. One of the options I was exploring was doing an MBA. The other option I was exploring was moving with Schlumberger to another geography. And then the other option that Rami had offered me was to join him to build the business. So Rami mentions, what he valued about me for this project. What I valued about him, or what I believed in him, was that he was going to be a person who moves fast, who would try a lot of ideas. He was a risk taker. I was not necessarily a risk taker at that point in time. And I trusted that his experience in between banking, which I know he says he doesn't want to raise money or doesn't like the process of raising money, but I trusted that he would be able to take care of the financial side of the business, the product side of the business, which was crucial in the early days. And I was there to lend my support on the operational side, which I was, in my opinion, quite good at back then. I mean, I still believe I'm quite good at it. But back then I held myself in high regards, and in hindsight, knowing what I know today, I don't think I was that good. But I believed in myself enough to have been able to take that risk, travel halfway across the country, half the world actually, halfway across the world. And just within 2 weeks of resigning, I was in Dubai. So May 11th was my first day here, 2015.
Well, I mean, that confidence obviously has carried you far, right? Whether you were, I'm sure you're selling yourself a little bit short. I mean, it all came together very well. And you speak very highly of him. To the point you kind of picked up on there, which is, you were speaking offline earlier, and you said that you don't particularly like the raising capital part of the sort of startup process or building your own business. Why in particular are you adverse to that? I remember as well hearing you say something to the effect of you don't like to ask family for money. What is it about that part of the business where you're like, that's not my favorite part?
Look, the whole concept around money, and I'm just kind of like, thinking about it lately. It's a very powerful energy, right? In business or in your personal life. And it's kind of like a wave that you can be either riding with it or it's kind of crashing against you, right? Depending on the time and the circumstances. So when it's not really in your control, it's quite scary, especially in the early days when you're trying to raise funds. You have kind of like a ticking clock that says, you have X amount of days left. If you don't raise the required funds, then you won't be able to continue. And, bringing that all in with all the risks that you've taken, how you've changed course in your life, it's quite scary. It's nerve-wracking, all of that.
Well, I mean, I think there's all these things you're talking about, like this is the first crucial decision, second crucial decision. There's all these sort of milestones along the way. And I think that's, you look back at anything you've built or anything that you've accomplished in life, in hindsight, there's all these stories you tell or, little points of success or failure along the way. And I'm kind of curious about the other side of the coin, which is the failure or perceived failure, the challenges of those early years. Jad, actually, could direct this to you. Like, are there things that you look back at, particularly like, oh, I wish we'd done that differently? Assumptions you made about the business early on that maybe didn't really pan out? Things that you would change if you go back? Although, again, it seems like so far it's working out pretty well.
Here's how I think about it. The things that we wanted to change, we changed. So when we realized something wasn't going right, we acted on it. In 2015, it's hard to go back that far. It's about almost 10 years ago. But there was an Uber for X. That was the theme. That was the word. There was an Uber for home cooking. There was an Uber for, laundry. There was an Uber for anything and everything. And we had made the mistake early on to believe that we were the Uber for laundry. And we thought that the service we were delivering was primarily logistics. And we thought that laundry was extremely simple. It didn't take us long to learn that laundry was the main business we needed to figure out. So we launched with next day delivery. Within 2 weeks, we removed next day delivery. Payments were a pain point for a lot of our customers.
Why did you remove next day delivery?
Because if you want to deliver quality, you need a bit of time to be able to manage the communication with customers, to be less aggressive with stain removal, to give the clothes the time they need to be cared for. For example, if you need to air dry something, you can't do that in next day delivery, especially in humid Dubai. You need a bit more time. So next day delivery was a tactical mistake because we had believed that customers wanted speed. What they valued was convenience, and we were learning that very fast. Rami mentioned in the beginning that you get a lot of data when you run a digital business, and we were getting a lot of data about what customers valued. And we saw that customers wanted, on the logistics side, they didn't really need us to be there within 30 minutes. What they wanted is, leave my clothes at the door, pick them up from my door. I don't want to be home. I don't want to be dealing with any driver. And for us, I remember during COVID, we're like, our secret's been discovered. Contactless delivery was a thing we'd been doing since 2015, that we had discovered, that we'd optimized on for many years. And so in terms of the mistakes, once we realized that laundry was the main thing we needed to do, we set out in 2017, so it was about a year and a half later, we realized that we needed to build our own facility. And then on the back of that, we managed to demonstrate that we could expand margins, perform better financially, lower the price of the wash and fold service from $79 down to $49 back in the day, and gain market share. And on the back of that, they also backed, he came up with the crazy idea of renting this big warehouse, 30,000 square feet, which we're so proud of today.
So why did you decide that was the scale you needed to go to immediately, the 30,000 square feet?
I really don't know, to be honest. It's
just ambition.
No, I know the conversations were on the plane in Shanghai. I'll tell you the story. Okay. I'll tell you the story.
Sure. He has a better memory than
okay. So we were on the plane. So we were flying. So part of this research of like deciding where we're going to build it, we said we're going to go to China and we're going to meet with this business called Tidy 24. I don't know if they're still around, but anyway. So we were flying back from Italy to Dubai, discussing the warehouse we're going to get. And we're going to get this massive warehouse, and we're going to have these conveyor belts that we're going to be able to like have a hybrid system where we clean some of the clothes, but not some of the other clothes. The kanduras, we don't have automation for that, so we're going to clean that outside, but all the shirts we have automation for, we're going to do it there. The conveyor belt would do it. We need a big space. We need this to scale. We want to have economies of scale. That was the word. We want to be able to produce more margin the more we clean. That's it. It was that simple. And it was like we were trying to imagine and draw it out. In hindsight, we didn't change much from that original plan on the flight back from Italy to Dubai. Anyway, he flew to Shanghai. Eventually, Tidy 24 showed them an office and no cleaning facilities. So we don't know if that was real or not. And then we flew to Korea, and we saw how big Korea was. And the market in Korea in Seoul is, wow, it's huge. I mean, it's the closest thing to Dubai in the laundry scene. If you wanted a laundry scene that's close to Dubai, the laundry culture was there, that's Korea. And so when we saw Korea, we said, we need to be able to build something in Dubai that could one day be a blueprint for expansion into other markets. And so when we went for that scale, we had the hope of one day being able to go to another market. In 2019, if we had two crises that happened in 2019, one of them was the Lebanese banking crisis. The other one was COVID that came 2020, but 3 months after. We had an agreement in principle to go expand to what was it at that point? Shenzhen. And we were dreaming of it. And we had met with this company called Fornet in China that had 1,200 franchises, stores. And they came to Dubai and they were impressed by what we had built, the scale that we built, and the software we built. And we were going to be the digital arm for their expansion into like tech and product in Shenzhen. It didn't work out, but in the end, that was why we went big. And it was going to pay off. And honestly, it has paid off. It just paid off locally, not internationally.
So I want to take us back to one of the crises that you mentioned in 2019, or 2020, obviously, global crisis for everyone, unfortunately, with COVID-19. And I think at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, you had the factory or the facility in Jebel Ali open for about 6 months before you could lock down everything, right? I imagine that was a crazy shift, a very difficult, challenging time for the business, for yourselves personally. Can you take us through what that was like? Because you obviously had these big plans, you had the potential partnership in China, you had these aspirations, and then everything changes, the world changes, practically overnight, right? Yeah. What was that experience in the early days of COVID like?
We've just kind of commissioned the facility, I would say in June, July of 2019. And I think we did the full commission by around October, November, where we brought everything in-house because we were outsourcing some other stuff. And then now everything's kind of in-house. And soon after that, we had the crisis. We had a kind of like a team of, senior leadership. Some of them are friends that we know that we went to university with. So coming down to the reality of the situation, looking at the money at the bank and how fast, your fixed costs are quite high now, and how the situation is getting, worse by the day, we saw that we needed to immediately take drastic actions to bring this business kind of to like bare bones. So we had to let go of a lot of people. It was back to Rami and Jad running it to the T basically, and we had to get the support of our employees who stayed. A lot of the employees were, obviously we have drivers, we have staff that work in the facility, and we had to tell them, hey, listen, there might be days that we don't have work, and our number one priority is to make sure that you have your food, you have your shelter, you have a place to stay, and that
your health is cared for. That was the objective at that point.
And there will be days that are considered unpaid days, right? And these are very difficult, and we have to take pay cuts, and we all did it as management, as senior management, all the way to the drivers. Obviously, more drastic on the higher levels. But I've put a promise and said that when this thing is over, I'll never forget this, right? And we'll definitely take care of you guys. And this will be something that sets, it'll be a big mark on me personally. So when I explain this to the drivers, not a single driver and not a single staff member left. And keep in mind, you have InstaShop booming with all the deliveries, Amazon booming, and they were getting, double the salary, let's say, elsewhere.
What was demand like then during COVID? I imagine it probably ramped up as people became more comfortable because you wanted things clean, right?
It was 80%, 85% at, the worst weeks down. So there was barely any work. And, going back to the drivers, not a single driver's left us or any of the staff. And they said, hey, listen, we're going to be going through this. We're going to struggle with you, but we'll come out of it. And if it wasn't for that, right, we wouldn't have been in a much more difficult position to be able to ramp up. We were talking during those days about a V-shaped return, right? And we're anticipating for that. And with, what we've done and what we've held on to and kept, we managed to kind of get that V-shaped return when, especially around the time where the vaccine kicked in and everyone's kind of getting the vaccinations and the city was beginning to open up, and then you had the expo after that. So we saw that, I think by 2021, we were already at our new all-time highs.
Yeah, January.
And today we're at around maybe 6 times almost the pre-COVID highs. So we've come a very long way since.
I imagine though that obviously COVID was a difficult time for everyone, but particularly if you're a business owner. But that kind of, challenge, whether it's raising capital or dealing with global crises or just anything that comes your way, is something that can produce a lot of anxiety, right? If you're a business owner, if you're somebody who has to care about the well-being of yourself, of others, of your family, that can be a real challenge. I'm curious, sort of, how do you guys approach that pressure? Because I think that's something that everyone who is an entrepreneur, everyone who is trying to build something, struggles with anxiety or that type of pressure.
I love that question.
Do you actually love it or not?
I do know. I actually really love it because you don't get the opportunity to discuss what now is referred to like commonly as mental health, right? You don't get the opportunity to discuss that often, even though the world has moved in a direction where we're a lot more comfortable discussing it now. I've been discussing it for years. And for me, the moment where it arrived was not COVID. It was 2018. I remember specifically walking down a street in Beirut, going to watch the Tunisia versus England game of the World Cup, and just feeling things were not okay. In my body, I was not okay. In my mind, I was not okay. And I had just had what I called like shadow palpitations. So I would get these very intense heart palpitations from the imagined sound of my phone ringing or vibrating, even though it was not it was a shadow vibration. It was in a different room. And it was just all the pressure from customers that I had accepted and like I felt responsible for everything that went wrong. And ultimately I didn't have that boundary set with myself. I just felt if something went wrong, it was my fault and my fault alone. And I had known something was wrong. I had listened to a podcast while in Korea, actually, while on one of those trips in 2017. And I remember this gentleman called Jerry Colonna of Reboot. It's called Reboot.io, I think now. And heard the podcast and said, you know what, let me reach out to them. I mean, if he's the best of the best, he's an ex-VC who's discussing this, he must understand my struggle a little bit. So I filled a form.
Mental health for people.
He was just talking about the stress that you go through as founders and as entrepreneurs. Like you have all these pressures. You have your personal life, which you've completely put to the side. You get invited to all these events in the early days with all your friends, then you stop talking to them. Then you have a relationship. And at that point, it was like my wife. We were doing she was my girlfriend at the time, fiance actually at the time. We were doing long distance. It was becoming a bit much. I felt a bit of a distance. Rami and I had grown the team. We had grown a bit apart. We had added senior leadership in the middle. It didn't feel right. Like we were no longer as connected as we were. We used to live in the same apartment in the early days. So our relationship was not in the best place in terms of synchronization either. And I just didn't feel good in my own skin. Something was not right. And so I filled that form. I wrote a massive email. And then within a few days, they reached out to me, put me in contact with the coach. I've been working with him for many years. It's been about 8 years that I've been working with him. And I still work with him. And during COVID, it was just a lot of going back to basics, or what he refers to as like physics. And so the executive coach's job is, I'm not going to say it's too dissimilar to therapy. I do therapy too, and it's a very different approach. But it was really focused on what are you able to give your business now, and what are you able to give? And at that point in time, honestly, I was in fighting mode. I just wanted to survive. I didn't want to get sick. I closed myself into the house, and I knew I had to go to the business. I had to go to the factory. I had to show my face. I had to speak to the drivers. We had to be in a bit of a warring mentality. The rules were not clear in COVID. So we would stay up, him and I, up until like 4 or 5 a.m. on some days, applying for those licenses to get the drivers on the road, even though we did not know, is that legal or not legal? It wasn't clear, but we'll take our shot. We'll get a slap on the hand, we adjust. So it was a lot of that, like working in the gray zone, and I was comfortable doing it, but I had to willingly let go of a few things. And one of them was the social life. I paid for that later. But at that point, it was making deliberate decisions of what I was able to handle. And the one thing that I could not handle was that an external circumstance was going to destroy what I spent 5 years building. No way. So I just was in that mode where I will not be defeated. I don't know if that's a healthy mentality in hindsight, but it worked. And not only did it work, I think, he mentioned how we were dealing with COVID. We went into every detail. We knew who was working how many hours on which day, and we were like being equal. So we made sure that people, when we arranged the schedules based on the rationed working hours, we made sure that there was equal distribution. We had like models of Excel to do this. And we knew based on the number of pickups and drop-offs how many people were working. And it was in that day. You wake up today, you know what you're doing today, and you go to sleep and you're like, great, we're still alive. The next day, great, we're still alive. The next day, great, we're still alive. And so you go from 75% down in April to 65% down in May to 55% down in June to 45% down in July. And then like things are getting better. And we're able to do a lot more with just Rami and I. And the team, we had a lot of people left, but the senior leadership, the CSO, CPO, CTO, chief everything officers that we had, we didn't have them anymore. We just had to rely on ourselves. And it was hard to communicate. I don't know how you remember this, but like he was stressed, I was stressed. You didn't want to talk about feelings. You just wanted to deal with it by yourself. Like, okay, I have my coach, I deal with my coach. You do you. You figure out you, because I can't talk to anyone. Not my wife, not anyone but myself, and every 2 weeks for 1 hour, an executive coach. So that's how I dealt with it. It was a difficult time, but it was, in hindsight, I mean, we're here. So,
I mean, yeah, you're here. You're still here. Rami, what do you remember of that time? As you mentioned, I'm sure there was a lot of anxiety on your part too. Did you also find interesting ways to deal with it? Was it something where are you generally healthier about how you approach that level of stress?
Yeah, so anxiety, I would say I've had anxiety since university, right? So I've been maybe 10 years on medication, kind of in and out. Medication had a big impact on allowing me to kind of like control the effects of what the anxiety does on my body. It's not panic attacks. I just have this kind of constant chest pain, which was very distracting, and you're unable, to produce work. So that was, it made a big difference, being able to accept that and come from, a culture that there's a negative, stigma around it. That I realized, no, that's not true. So I think that helped. Also, anxiety is not just about your business and what happens there, but, there could be other personal parts of your life that you haven't discovered yet that's causing you anxiety, that you eventually, need to find out and figure out. And I think, I've done some of that therapy. I have different approaches on it. I can't do too much of it. I do when it's necessary. I found it to be quite helpful. But I think what's important is to have a partner that also balances you, and gives you kind of like, sometimes they take more, sometimes you take more of the load. So in the example of during COVID, there was a time where I completely cracked, where I was dysfunctional after some news that we heard on. I got a notification saying something like, the access points between Dubai and Abu Dhabi is closed, right? And our facility is in Dubai servicing Abu Dhabi, right? And Jad mentions, how do we operate in the gray zone? What's allowed? What's not allowed? How do we operate? And we've been doing that for a while, but I just had enough, right? And I called him. I'm like, I'm done, right? Like literally, like, I was dysfunctional for like a week after that. But he had kind of the strength still in him to still operate the same way we've been operating for a couple of weeks. So I think that's quite important to have.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, but obviously you know each other for a very long time. Arguably a very successful relationship, possibly one of the most successful relationships in your lives. 21 years, going strong, which is great. And you have each other to rely on, which is, I think, a really fantastic thing for someone to have, whether you're founding a business or just going through any hardship in life. Why do you think you guys click so well? Like, why are you able to live together, work together? Typically there'd be some friction that would come into that. I'm sure you've gotten this question before, but I still think it's fascinating that you guys don't seem to get tired of each other.
Before coming here, I was in Montreal literally a few days before coming to Dubai. And I was sitting down with a very good friend of mine who now lives here. And he told me, get ready to lose a friend. And I was like, why? And he's like, man, friends who do business with each other, it never works out. Even if you guys love each other, it's a recipe for disaster. And, we were talking about it just offline a few minutes ago. And I mean, in my mind, when he said that, I was like, whatever. I don't know what this guy's talking about. I've never lost a relationship. And the reality is I've never lost a relationship I valued. I've probably lost many relationships, but none that I valued. And at that point, Rami and I had been very good friends. What we didn't discuss is that for a while, we lived together in a studio in Montreal for like, 2-3 months. Slept in the same bed, even, like a queen bed. We had shared a lot of difficult moments together, and I knew him at his lowest and I knew him at his best. And I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, but
it's okay. You're allowed to.
Yeah, I don't judge much. I don't judge people for what they're like when they're at their worst. I mean, I can be irked by something, but I accept them. And in general, whether it's Rami or anyone else, I can just say, this is who this person is. Live their, you do you. I'm going to do me, but don't impose anything on me. And I never felt he was imposing anything on me at any point before that. So I didn't think that the relationship would be lost before I joined. And I think testament to it now. I mean, yeah, you go through some ups and downs, but I mean, if I tell him I love him, it's okay to say it.
It's encouraged.
Yeah. I say it. I say it. I tell him I love him. So I don't have this worry of, will the relationship be lost? It's like, no, if you don't want to lose it, you don't lose it. What are the priorities? And so what I valued about him, which I know is another one of the questions you've given us, but what I valued about him is that he was always like clear. Whenever there's conflict, he seeks to address it immediately. Whenever there's an area of gray, he doesn't want to have gray. He just wants to like talk about it right now. Let's get this out of the way. In the 10 years we've done business together, I've never once been taken aback or by surprise on a decision he made that impacted me. So we could, at least he would tell me, and then we could fight it out. You can have a screaming match. You can be angry with each other for a few days, but then I don't
think we've ever had a few days, actually.
No, I mean, we go to sleep well at night. Like, the thing is, you go to sleep well at night. You go
sleep angry, right?
Right, yeah. You go to sleep well at night. You get that out of the way, even if it means you speak for many hours after, right? But you have these principles, and then you've upheld them for many years in your relationship, whether try to do the same thing with my wife. I actually have to call her and apologize for something I said earlier now that I'm saying this. But yeah, I mean, we've upheld these principles, we've maintained them, and his values are something that I appreciated from before. I wouldn't live life his way, but I love the way he lives, and good for him, and I think he would say the same thing about me.
Turning our attention then back to the company, back to Washmen. I'm curious sort of how you've gone through COVID, you come back out, you're doing very, very well, and you start offering new services. Yeah, how do you come up with sort of what people want? Is it based on demand? Is it data driven? Is it something we look for trends in the market? Things like your, I know, shoe care, bag care, home care. Or how do you start adding those types of services to the standard fold and press?
Okay, so one thing that's important is research. So we do a lot of research for services, that exist already in the market here. That could be adjacent services that we can potentially bring into our operations and synergize and upsell. Then we look at also opportunities that exist and are being capitalized on in other markets, right? So one example was wash and fold. Back in the day, here was, you send your stuff to a laundry and dry cleaner just to do dry cleaning and cleaning and pressing of, your formal wear, let's say. Whereas it's not affordable for you to send in your underwear and your socks in a matter of fill the bag, laundry by the pound. That's what they call in the US, or wash and fold. So I said, let's bring that in here. And we've come up with our own concept, which is laundry by the bag as opposed to by the pound, which is much easier for the consumer to understand. And today, I look at many laundries in the UAE, they have wash and fold, written outside of their shops, which I look at that and be like, you know what, I invented that here. I brought it to the market, or we brought it.
Do you take it as, flattery?
It is. I just had the moment, I would say 2 days ago, where this really not good laundry just had the word wash and fold outside. I'm like, that wouldn't have been, something that you offer if it wasn't for us, right? So that's cool. And then there's a lot of, you say data and trends. We survey our customers. I think also a very important part of, being an entrepreneur is intuition. You do have this kind of magic feeling. And then you build on with research and with surveying your customers and with data. And I think that's quite important while you're establishing kind of a product to market fit.
And where does that intuition or magic feeling come from? Maybe that's a redundant question because you don't know, but is there something that triggers it? Are there things you do to come up with ideas? Do you spend time, workshopping with each other? Is it just
you're living the business? You're living your business every single day. In the early days of the business, you're so connected to every single part of it. And so he mentioned wash and fold, but what he didn't mention is the idea came when he was sitting over we were living together. We were standing over the laundry basket, and he's like, why am I going to do the underwear at home?
I was separating the stuff.
Yeah.
This goes to Washmen, this stays here. This goes to Washmen, this goes to, and I'm like, half my basket is an opportunity. And
the visual. That's the visual aspect. It's like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. This is a problem I can solve. And so we solved it. And with home care, before we were trying to fundraise, we went to one of our investors is called Henkel in Germany, and we were discussing it with the gentleman who was running it back then, and we were telling him about a towel subscription. Rami had the idea of a towel subscription. We were discussing it on the train from Dusseldorf. I forgot to where, but from Dusseldorf, and we sat on that idea. A year later, we're walking around the wash and fold facility, and I just look at all these baskets, and I'm like, why are there all these baskets on the floor? We don't have space for them. And they're full of linens. And we had never designed wash and fold for linens, but customers figured out a way to get a service for a very good price. And we looked at it and we said, this is not what we designed it for. All these machines, clearly customers value this. We can in fact do this for the same cost, but with much better quality if we did it in our clean and press facility. And we actually ironed them, because when you use ironing equipment professional ironing equipment, you don't need to dry them. And so energy-wise, it's much more efficient. And so we said, okay, here's something. And then like Rami said, you go to the data, you survey customers, and you see, okay, this is something that's valuable. We offered a discount of 35%, I think. And we saw a huge uptick in how many customers were using us for their linens. And then during COVID, when we had our back against the wall, workwear, shirts, blouses, skirts, pants were not coming in, and we needed something fast, and we already knew what to do. And so they came up with the idea. Rami and Hussam, who was with us back then, managing our strategy, came up with the idea of home care as a back concept. And you can take it from there if you want to tell the rest of it.
Is that where something like the finery came from? Is that the same kind of thing? Was it like a light bulb moment or something like that?
No. So I think by the time we had the facility and we built the facility, because it was 2019, that's when we commissioned the facility, and then there was 2015 to 19 where we were outsourcing and, in-housing just wash and fold. So when you start having everything in-house, and you start having experience in improving, and you have the resources to buy a machine, and you have a physical space to be able to put it in, and the facility is quite large, you start thinking of, okay, I can use some of this space here to, for instance, launch shoes, right? We built a room, and we're like, we're going to do shoe cleaning in this room. And then when we launched that exploded. And then within a month, we're like, okay, this room doesn't fit the shoe operations. We need to go somewhere else. So we got another warehouse, 10,000 square feet facility on top of the 30,000 for the shoes and bag cleaning. And then we're like, okay, what do we do with this room? And we had kind of a product roadmap. Eventually, we need to get into this super high end, because as a business, we want to cater for everything, from your socks and underwear all the way to your most cherished items. And there's a price point for everything, right? And I don't want to, you can't look at Washmen and say Washmen is expensive, right? If you want to compare me for, washing bed sheets through our home care bag or your gym clothes, we're actually the cheapest option you have in the market, right? Or one of the cheaper ones. And you don't need ironing, for instance, for your socks and your underwear. You just need a bag, fill it up, and for a set price, that's almost 3 loads of laundry that will do for you. But if you send me a Tom Ford, very expensive suit that you wash or clean or dry clean once every couple of years, you're willing to pay for that 15, 20,000 dirham suit, something like 250 dirhams, to make sure that you have insurance, that if anything goes wrong, we'll pay for that at almost full price, right? In the case of we go up to 10,000 dirhams per item. And then you have also the peace of mind that, nothing there's no gamble by sending this item to Washmen. There's a bag called the Finery, that specific service that will cater for this. So we remove, the consumer becomes much more experienced with how to use the service later down the road after, the second order, third order, fourth order, especially when they start understanding the different types of bags, and each bag has a different service. It is a challenge for us to be able to explain all of that as a one shot for, the first time customer that comes in, because usually you come in, I have, let's say, a kandura that I need to clean. You're not thinking of home care or shoes or whatever, right? So we cater for you for what you need and why you came to Washmen. But then later down the road, we try and upsell you and educate you about how Washmen is different than your regular dry cleaner down the road. By, we restore things like your shoes and bags. We have this home care service. We have a wash and fold that no one really does well, and we've introduced to the market. And now I would say we're a laundry one-stop solution for all your laundry needs at different price points.
So just quickly, unfortunately, because we're almost out of time. Okay. Although this has been great. Thank you, guys. You have aspirations, or you've stated an aspiration to be the quote-unquote best laundry in the world. Small, low bar, right? What does that actually mean to you tangibly? Like, what do you need to do to get to that best laundry?
Okay, I'll be quick, then I'll leave the rest for Jad.
I mean, you could say what you want to say.
So I think that way of thinking was in the past, where we would say that, we want to be the best laundry in the world. I think for the last couple of years, based on the, 18, 19 countries and research we've done, flying to different laundries and seeing different operations and seeing different experiences around this problem, I'm confident that we are the best laundry experience that consumers have. And, I have people leaving Dubai, going back to London or going back to the US or whatever, frequently emailing me and saying that the number one thing they miss about Dubai is Washmen and what we've solved for them in their lives here when they were back in the UAE. So I think we are at the best. And the way I look at how do we improve is we're kind of, we compete with ourselves, right? So every month, operationally speaking, we have the data and we have the targets, and we measure these things week on week, month on month, and we are a better version of ourselves. And that kind of moves us forward to a world of, I don't know, what's the end goal here? I still don't know. We're still operating. We're still competing with ourselves.
It's just continuous improvement. So I'll give you something that's like, since the show is called Homegrown DXB, I'll tell you what. I'll give you something that is in line with the theme. We had a chip on our shoulders, and I've said it somewhere else, I don't know, and I say this, these two young Arab kids building a laundry business. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Americans are doing what they're doing. In Spain, Spaniards are doing what they're doing. In Germany, these ex-rocket internet wonder kids are building ZipJet. In London, this ex-founder who's built 3 successful businesses and sold them has built Laundrap. We go to a conference and we meet all of these people, and you see the Brazilians, the South Koreans, the Italians, the New Yorkers, the Israelis, the Londoners, and you're like, man, I felt so small. And so, that mentality of saying, and I felt so small not for any other reason other than maybe I'm predisposed to that personally, but the way I had themed it is, we're building this out of Dubai, and Dubai today, in the eyes of everyone around the world, is very different than Dubai in 2015, 2016, right? Before, we were discounted just because we were from here. And so I had that as a chip on my shoulder. I can't speak for him, but it was a chip on my shoulder. So when we would say back then we wanted to be the best laundry in the world, it was because we just wanted to compete with everyone else. And it's, that classic trope of you want to compete with the rest of the world, and then one day, Jedi, you realize that you only have yourself to compete with. And then that's the point we got to. But the moment I realized that was a shallow objective was 2018, 2019, when all the people we would always be asking, scouring their businesses for answers, asking them these questions about how do you do this, how do you do that? When they started coming to us and saying, wait, how did you build this core part of your business, the wash and fold? And they're like, oh, we never thought about that, because the success of Wash and Fold is not that we figured out the bag, is that we reverse engineered the entire operation in a way that made it financially feasible and profitable to offer it to you in that bundling. No one had done that. They had just thought that it's a number that needs to be ending with a 9, starting with a 4, 5, or 6, right? And then it needs to have infinite number of clothes, and then we figure out the rest, and we do it the same way we do everything. We had thought about it differently. And so we were out of the box thinkers in a lot of what we did, because we were not blessed with infinite capital like everyone else.
So money's a curse.
Money,
right?
Yeah, money becomes a curse. Having abundant money becomes a curse because you defer solving the problem in a sustainable manner. And so we had that chip on our shoulders because we were 2 young Arab kids, sure, Western educated, but 2 young Arab kids, grew up in Saudi Arabia, moved to Dubai in our mid-20s, in both of us in our mid-20s, building a business, competing with everyone else around the world. And we just wanted to compete, and we wanted to do our best, and our best meant being better than everyone else.
From the best laundry in the world to even better and better, continuous improvement. Thank you guys so much. Rami, Jad, thank you so much for being with us on Homegrown DXB. Very, very impressed with what you guys built, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Thank you.
Thank you.